And then I'd always kept out of national politics. I've always enjoyed local government. You knew that people were more left or right, or centrist, but national politics didn't play a big role. So I'd always kept out of politics. The local Labor MP had approached me quite early on in my local government. He had diabetes. Jeff Braybrook was his name. And he had contracted diabetes and was considering retiring. And he had approached me to see if I would be interested. And I said to say to him, I did think about it because it was a safe Labor seat. But I said to him, look, I would be wrong. It would be wrong for me to take up that opportunity because I'm not really a Labor person. I'm really more to the right than that. And we remain good friends. But I did start talking to my husband about what it would mean and would he consider it, and then I did stand in. So I didn't get elected back onto council in '96. I didn't really try. I got quite disenchanted. We had a great council which rebuilt Napier City Centre, actually. And it's still like that today. And then the following council, we just had some people from outside council who just made life difficult. They questioned everything. They were always constantly in the media criticising, and that actually wears you down. And I was doing quite a lot of work with the development of McLean Park, and we got the lighting. It was just a happy coincidence that the lighting technology was changing at the same time as television camera technology. And so I convinced the New Zealand Cricket Council and New Zealand Rugby to put a bit of money in to help us, and we put lights into McLean Park. And we had the first day-night cricket there, and we had the first night All Black trial on McLean Park. So I was doing a lot of work with that. And in those days, the different breweries sponsored the different codes. So there was always an argument between cricket and rugby as to how long they played and how long their breweries' signs were up. And again, an individual who just came in at the last minute and just made life really, really difficult with everything we're trying to do. And it's the only time in my whole career that I really felt I was up against someone who resented the fact I was a woman. And it was a male domain. Rugby is about men, not women. Right. And so therefore, what right have you to be involved? It's the only time in my life I've really come up against that so overtly. And I just got so fed up with all of this. And I didn't even run a campaign. I didn't have the strength, looking back on it, I didn't have the strength to say, this is not for me anymore. I just took the easy way out, really, and I knew I wouldn't be re-elected and didn't try. Right. Which my father gave me heaps of.
Can imagine after what you said earlier.
Yeah, but was very supportive, and so that was then my opportunity to get involved with national politics. Right. That created the gap, if you like.
Sure. And so you did that?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got very high on the list, actually. I had a great team who worked really hard to help me, and I went into Parliament at number 20 on the list under Jenny Shipley. But I went in as a list MP based in Napier, and then tried to win that electorate when Jeff Braybrook retired, tried to win that electorate and failed. So I had a 2002 to 2005. I didn't have, wasn't in Parliament, and wasn't sure whether I wanted to go back. Really wasn't sure. And then I had my arm twisted by a couple of colleagues who brought me the data and said, we think that the East Coast electorate is winnable, and we'll help you build a team and support you. And so it meant moving to Gisborne. And so my poor dear husband helped me when we sold our house and we moved up to Gisborne. He was reluctant, in fairness, the last minute. But I worked for a year, campaigned for a year to win that seat. And I'll always be grateful to my husband, because if I hadn't got elected, we were on the skin of on the bones of our bum, as they say, because we used all our resources, really.
The politics started in the National Party when I saw a sign, a little notice board in February 1989, which said, all welcome to the Silverdale branch of the Waikato Electorate National Party. So I turned up to that, sat at the back, obviously was the only young guy there, got asked to come to the front, and then a whole lot of serendipitous things happened all at once that just kept happening for the next 30 years. And the first was I made a connection, really deep connection with the electorate chairman of the time. Because I was young, the National Party, had a lot of retired people sitting in that branch. They wanted to have somebody young. It was great. Someone from the next generation's interested in politics. They invited me to the electorate AGM. I turned up to that. I was then invited to say a few words. They then said, why don't you become part of the executive? Why don't you be our young Nat? So that's what happened. They said, why don't you come down to the national conference in 1989? That's what happened. It was in Dunedin. That's where I got to meet Winston Peters for the first time, my local MP, Ruth Richardson, met Jim Bolger, I met Sir Robert Muldoon. That was the first national conference. I have been to, 30 since, and kept doing that. So I became involved in the Young Nats. Then I became student president. I absolutely imagined myself being the student president. No one had been a student president from a young Nat, right? Young Nats don't get elected student presidents. Well, they did in 1991 because there were 4 Labour Party people or left of centre people stood against me because they were so horrified that a young Nat was standing. They split the vote and I won. And on it went. And so at the end of being a student president, I then got a job in the National Party as a regional. The only time they did this was the 1993 election, where they put regional officers that looked after a particular region, which meant that I went round the Central North Island region providing support and advice for the National Party MPs trying to get re-elected. So that threw me in at the very young age of like 21, 22, 23, round there, in the mechanics of running campaigns and how to win them, what to do to try to not to lose them, although we got swept away in most cases because of the swing against the national government in that year. It was remarkable. So I connected with hundreds of people, including my predecessor in this job, Tony Ryle, who was a remarkable politician. And then from there, found myself down in Wellington in 1994. And my job was to be the secretary for the party committee that worked out how to deal with MMP, because we just had the MMP referendum. All our rules had to change. And I was the party person that coordinated that from a operation support perspective. Remarkable experience. And by November 1994, was in the private office of Jim Bolger, the then Prime Minister. Serendipity. And so then I had 3 years travelling around the country, working for him, putting together events every weekend, travelling with him, meeting people from all walks of life, from maraes to schools to hospitals to businesses, from Kaikoui to Stewart Island for 3 years, every weekend, travelling with the Prime Minister. Absolutely extraordinary experience. And so by then, I was absolutely sure that this was going to come to pass, that I was going to be a Member of Parliament. And the question now was when, not if. And then the big decision was to pull out of the political process, the overt, determined political process, and go and do something else for a while.
And why was that? What was the...
I just had a deep, I had a deep sense that if you just kept going in that process, you find yourself an MP by the time you're 30 and you haven't done anything. You have done politics. You have done the process of politics, the sort of the framework of politics. But politics is more than process. Politics is a whole lot more than knowing how to get yourself nominated and get yourself elected and sitting in a caucus. Politics is representing a community. It is understanding people and understanding the diversity of experience, lived experience that is in your community and giving effect and a voice to it. But what I decided to do was not put myself forward as a young candidate when opportunities came up in 99 and 02, but to stay working. And the opportunities kept coming up. Like in 08, and Simon raises it in his book, he and I were on the same committee in Tauranga supporting Bob Clarkson, right? And we all thought Bob was going to stand again, and he didn't. And so everyone would have thought it would have been Simon versus me for that nomination. But I had just started at Apata as a chief executive. So he says in his book, I was the first person he rang to see, who the competition was going to be. And I said, no, it's all yours, mate. And I backed him. I was a delegate and he got my vote as the candidate for National. And, he built a fantastic career subsequently. And then in 2011, the opportunity presented itself in Coromandel. But I'd just started at Fonterra. And I said, no, I can't do that. So I then assumed I was going to be at Fonterra. It was a senior role there for quite a few years. And then Tony Ryle, after already renominating, decided to step down, but like what I did. And suddenly there was an opportunity. And as Michelle said, well, slightly more vernacular that I'm going to share it. I think it's time you either put your hand up for this or stop talking about it. So I did.
2014, am I right? Is that when you started when you got elected as MP for Bay of Plenty?
Yeah. So how that works is firstly you've got to be nominated by the party as your candidate. So Tony Ryle stepped down, said he wasn't going to stand again after all. So I put my name forward and ran a process. And on June the 3rd, 2014, got the support of the local National Party people and just basically hit the ground running. I knocked on 12,000 doors and introduced myself as, the National Party candidate. And look, we did very well. We got a massive party vote and, got a huge support locally. But I acknowledge that support came from the fact that, and you must always never forget this in politics, it was the people that got you there in terms of the National Party people. And I was there. I got elected because I was a National Party, right? And so John Key said to me right at this sort of start, both Michelle and I, sort of advice was first 3 years, work your ass off locally. People, and like everything in life, there's first impressions, right? So there's this new person who's become elected. Who is he? Oh, some national guy's got re-elected or been elected. What's he like? It's a blank canvas. And you have to make sure that the people in your community of Papamoa and Mangatapu and Te Puna and Kaimai, when they have that conversation, oh, what's that new guy? What's that new guy like? That people say, oh, he's a pretty hard worker from what I can see. Because people make a decision about you. They decide that you are either someone who's got their interests at heart and work hard, and then once that's locked in, that's what they think about you. Yep. And frankly, that's no different. Whatever the career, whatever professional role you choose, that applies. But I think it particularly applies to politics. So I just really worked hard locally and absolutely loved it because these are my people, right? This is my city. We moved here in 1974 when there were 27,000 people. Yeah. There was no Papamoa. Well, there was actually one street. And now look at it.
So your time in politics that was 2005, wasn't it? I think you started.
Yeah.
There. What what was it? Was it the housing policy or the passion about that? Was that what drove you to stand? Or what? Yeah,
That's what got me into Parliament. Yeah, is that I wanted to get this housing stuff going.
yeah,
I think the first year I was in there, well, first year National did housing, they did 4 houses in a year. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
yeah.
Labor, I don't know if they did any. They that was Helen Clark's years in those years. But I think housing is very important. You know, if you can keep your families together with a reasonable house, doesn't have to be a good house, but a reasonable house. If you can keep your families together, I mean, you don't get crooks and all that. So those that stay together, I'll reword that. Those that play together, stay together.
Yeah.
And if families stay together, usually don't have trouble.
Right. Yeah.
So and again, if you have the point system on the house, the parents are going to tell the kids not to abuse the house, not to beat up or so forth, because we lose money, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the whole thing starts to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah. So how did you find your time in politics? Was it frustrating?
yeah, after the first 12 months, I realised I shouldn't have gone.
Right.
If you're not in the top 3 or 4, you might as well not be there.
Right.
And I certainly wasn't in the top 3 or 4.
We couldn't get her anywhere, and we had other families that needed to come into the safe house, and I had to evict her, and I had to evict her into complete and utter homelessness so that she would get far enough up the list with work and income to be able to go into a motel for a week. And that was all we could give her. And I just felt morally corrupt. Because she said to me, well, what was the point of leaving? And that's when women often go back, because at least they had a home for their kids, right? And I just thought, there's something. I just cannot continue to play this game. I cannot. I had to do that. I had to put that family out on the street. And it just broke my heart. And I thought, right, that's it. I'm going into politics. I'm changing the world. So that's basically what I did. I'd had people ask me if I'd want to, you should go into politics, that kind of thing. I thought, stuff it. I'll do it.
And you did.
And I did. I
did.
did.
Yeah.
Again, timing, amazing thing.
Yeah.
You know, there were people that gave me petrol tokens, and would come round, and there was always a box of goodies left on the doorstep, and they help you in a lot of ways. But it was a big electorate, and I did a week in Gisborne, and then I'd drive over and do a week in Whakatane, because the electorate went from Wairoa right round to the middle of the Whakatane River. So it was a big electorate. It got bigger in my time, but it took a lot to actually a lot of expense to be moving around constantly. And people gave me accommodation and were really, really helpful. About 3 weeks out from the election, I was driving over the Trafford's Hill, which is the big hill at the end of the Waiweka Gorge on the Gisborne side, and my car stopped. A truckie gave me a ride back to where I could get a phone, and I rang a towing company in Aportiki who came out and picked up my car, didn't charge me, took it back to a great man in Whakatane called Wally Sutherland, who dropped an engine into it. He said, I don't know how long it'll last. I said, Wally, I got $2,000 worth of sign writing on this car. It's only got to last 2.5 weeks. And he didn't send me a bill for a couple of months, and then he halved it. So, people help you, but it still is a big ask, financial risk that people take. when they stand as candidate that I don't think a lot of people understand.
No, I don't think they do. Yeah, that's right. It's an interesting insight.
It was just the sense of accomplishment and destiny was just extraordinary.
Oh, it was amazing. I used to turn up to Parliament. I never got over the awe, if you like, of walking up those steps and thinking, I actually, I work here.
Yeah.
It is a really, really special, privileged position to be in. And the day you stop that is the day you should retire. Stop feeling that. It's the day you should retire. Yeah.
But at the same time, man, I've had the most amazing opportunities to do things and to change things and to have experiences, international experiences. It can be lonely and it can be hard, but I've got some amazing friends who are in Parliament who understand. I've got some amazing friends long-time friends since, children. And you just learn to cherish those that you can trust. Yeah. But, it's the most bizarre experience when you go into Parliament and you realise that all the security guards have learnt your name and people literally stop and open doors for you, like literally open doors for you. And when you're off and out and about and doing something, people treat you differently. And then I always find people are like, you're just quite normal, aren't you? Yes, I am. I'm quite normal. I put my trousers on one leg at a time, and I think that's the joy or the blessing of having list MPs as well as electorate MPs. There's a series of people that get into Parliament who wouldn't normally be in Parliament. So we get that chance. It was a real surprise when I first started. Like it really was that you think, okay, you're an MP, great. You go into Parliament, you realise you've lost the ability to control your day. And having been in an NGO and, I was used to being able to problem solve and fix things and fast-paced, but I was also able to control my day. When you're in Parliament and you're backbencher, you're literally not able to leave the precinct unless you have a whip slip, unless it's lunchtime or dinner time, right? And so, people say to me, oh, wow, where's a great place to eat in Wellington? I have no idea. There are 2 places I eat in Wellington. One of them is my apartment and the other is Copperfields, which is our local, our cafe that's sitting in the, you don't get out, you don't get to shop, you don't get to explore, you don't get to do any of those things. You're literally there and you're there from about 8 a.m. in the morning till 10 p.m. at night. So your days are long and, you can't just whip out for a coffee with a friend or something. You're literally there the whole time. So it's a long day. And I didn't realise that that's how it worked with being on precinct. But I'm used to it now, but it felt very confining.
Yeah. You're not just an MP; you've become a minister. So, can you talk to me about that? How that came about and what that feels like? I mean, that's a level above again, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it is. And really, I don't understand anyone who goes to Parliament who doesn't aspire to be a minister, because that's, you get to sit at that table at the top floor on the 10th floor of the Beehive. And New Zealand has a really unique Westminster system, that cabinet table is only cabinet ministers. There's no officials there. You have to know your stuff. You have to be well briefed. So there's no help. if you're trying to convince your colleagues, if you've got a paper, there's no help from your officials. You're the one that can be questioned by 19 people, particularly the Prime Minister. So I've never understood anyone who didn't aspire to be a cabinet minister, and really you pinch yourself that you have that opportunity.
I think those ambitious amongst us could see opportunity to climb the ladder in opposition. And obviously the first big dramatic transition was Bill deciding that he wasn't going to keep in charge of this. And then we have a pretty intense leadership battle, which Simon was successful in. And, being the leader of the opposition is described as the worst job in the world, certainly in the country. And he gave it everything. And, actually, to his credit, had the party in a reasonable position going into 2020. And then COVID hit, and then, our vote collapsed, right? And by that stage, I had the profile of the Zero Climate Bill, the climate change profile. I then got put by Simon into agriculture and had pretty strong support within that sector. And I was seen as an alternative to him. And so the conversations began. And, this is when ego and hubris start rearing its head again, because, I saw an opportunity where actually this could work in a way that I could be the leader of the National Party and potentially Prime Minister at the end of 2020. And so it got, pretty tense there in the caucus as it became clear that Simon's support was ceding away, particularly from the broader country, and that was impacting the national vote. And there was quite a lot of conversation within the party and outside that actually we needed to make a change, and I was the person that we needed to change to. And so that happened in May, and it was a remarkable point, to find yourself, to challenge Simon for the leadership and to win it, and to have caucus support to be the leader of the National Party. It was a remarkable moment.
Look, Winston is a clever guy. I mean, he's just a bit lazy, that's all. When we went to the select committee meetings and things like that, Winston would be on some of the groups and had to go to there. He would, you might know the system, on a Monday night, make sure I'm right here. On a Monday night, we used to get a heap of papers that big, 2 inches thick. And we had to read anything that concerned us, we had to read that by Tuesday lunchtime. Because what had happened, we go to select committees to discuss them, you see. Winston had never spent any time. He'd arrive at the select committee with the thing still wrapped up. He hadn't read it at all. But otherwise, I think Winston was quite clever. Why did Winston get beaten in Tauranga? Well, I was well known. We all agree with that. My name was well known. Yeah. And that was a bigger disadvantage. But why I won it in tongue-tied was Winston kept talking about Bob Clarkson. Bob Clarkson won't win. Bob Clarkson won't do this. Bob Clarkson won't do that. Good on you, Winston. Keep going. More names out, the better. So I made a decision, no public meetings. Now, I might have a few on the street corner and things like that, but big meetings, none. Because if Winston come along to a public meeting, he could blow me to pieces. Right. Because I'm a new boy, Yeah. So I said it, my staff in my office nearly blew their top. And I said, no, that's it. I made a decision. I think we'll win this because this is how it'll go. So every meeting he went to, public or not, he'd spend the first 20 minutes saying how bad Bob Clarkson was. You know what people do when you run somebody all the time? They take their side, don't they? Well, not always, but they do take their side. Yeah. And that's what happened. I mean, he just lost vote after vote after vote.
He was doing your marketing for you.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. So I think Winston was very clever, but he made one mistake there. He really did.
Yeah. Yeah. What about his policies? Were you in agreement with anything that he stood for or his party stood for?
Yes, he did. Some of his immigration stuff was good. I didn't study that side of things very much. I suppose I looked after my own field. But no, he had some that were pretty good. He didn't like immigration very much. You know, they bring these groups of odds about people in,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
But he's a bit of a player. I mean, he plays on the one that suits the market. And this Maori one at the moment, of course, he's quite keen on that because he can get some, what's the word, some energy out of the people on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as far as a politician, when John Brash was leader of the opposition, I used to get on pretty good with Don. He had some good ideas. But then he went, of course, and John Key took over. Well, John's a really good speaker, you know, and things like that, dealing with the public. And politically, that's really good news, isn't it? I mean, that's what you want.
Yeah.
But I was there to get the job done, not muck around talking to the public.
Yeah.
Some amazing people. John Key was just an incredible intellect. Bill English, the biggest intellect I've ever come across in all my life. Beats even my husband. I don't tell him that too often. And people like Stephen Joyce, who just have so much commercial knowledge, and you know, it was an absolute pleasure to go in and someone like Chris Finlayson, who's a very talented lawyer, but he brought to his treaty work such innovation that brought both worlds together, Matarangi Māori or the Maori world view, and melded that into legal frameworks in ways that no one had ever thought about before. And so, you know, there was some amazing times.
We were all through that period where, you know, that first term, really until Jacinda turned up, 8 weeks from the 2020 election, National was miles ahead. You know, that's why they made the change in 2020, is that, you know, Andrew Little was 15 points behind, 8 weeks to go. And so, you know, I was part of a remarkable third-term government, just watching it. You can't dodge the fact that ultimately it was a call that I thought change needed to happen. And, you know, so did other people. And ultimately so did the National Party caucus. But the management of it, of that transition, was, you know, tough and occurred in the most extreme of circumstances, right? And you can run through your mind, could you have done it differently? Should you have done it differently? What would happen if you didn't, if you held on and let Simon take it through to the election? Would he have got better than 25% that Judith got? Don't know. At the time, it looked pretty perilous from our perspective.
And you have your triumphs, and you have. I mean, I still have a passion for education. Obviously, that's my background. That's my family experience. I picked up a portfolio that I knew New Zealand had been at the top of the list and was on the downward slope. And you know, we tried to do things to lift our particularly our Māori and Pacifica students, but also, and I see Nationals brought it back again, to get some accountability back to parents, because teachers only have kids for a short period of time. Actually, your best teachers are your parents, but they need to understand how their child is doing, where the weak areas are, where they can help, and you You know, I worked hard to try and get that through to the unions, that it wasn't about judging good teaching or bad teaching. It was about trying to create a progress that could be followed by both teachers and parents and students. Actually, the students picked it up very well. I went into classrooms where kids would take me out and there'd be a big wall that would have, you know, the progress that they were making. And they say, well, look, I'm really bad. I'm not doing particularly well in my mathematics, but my reading, I'm way ahead of you know, blue class or whatever it was. So as I say, kids know. They know which groups are the top groups and which aren't, and they know that whether they're up with the rest of the class or falling behind.
Yeah. So are you referring to, Anne, there about the
national standards
implementation?
Yeah, and the opposition used to say, well, they're not national and they're not standard. Well, of course they're not standard. I was very much conscious of the fact you don't want to teach to a test. You don't want to be testing kids because that only says what they learn on one day. Whereas what you want to be doing is watching a child's progress over a period of time and using various ways that teachers have to assess the progress that they were making, and then track that and talk to parents about it, because parents can help. I had my granddaughters for the week before Christmas, and their mother said to me, the teachers said, you know, for the littlest one, we've got to keep her reading up because kids over the Christmas holidays, 6 weeks, they often fall behind. If they're not natural, enthusiastic readers in particular. So she has to, you know, can you make sure that every night we go through one of her books? And that's how parents want to be involved and need to be involved in children's education. And all too often you hear parents say, look, I have no idea. I just have no idea. And I don't know what I can do to help. Yeah, exactly. So that was, you know, I still am passionate about education. I still want to make sure that, because it is the enabler. It means it doesn't matter what your background is. If you get a good education and it enables you to go on and do a whole lot of things. As Minister of Tertiary, which I was for about 14, 15 months, nearly killed me to have the whole lot. I said to Jan Tonetti, be careful. But, you know, to be at a graduation and see someone who was the first person in their family ever to get a degree, you know, that is really something. Or even to go on to be the first person in their family to go on to tertiary education. That is really something, and that gives that person a huge opportunity in life. So education is the enabler.
I ended up chairing Foreign Affairs and Defence and Trade. I went to Iraq. This is all in my first term. I went to Iraq with the Minister of Defence. I went to, in 2016, I went to the two American conventions, the Republican Convention and the Democratic Convention, 1 week after the other. Listened to Obama, listened to Trump, met Jesse Jackson. I mean, these are out there experiences, and that was just in the first term. Right? So remarkable job, and absolutely loved it. And, you know, had a very good personal result here in 2017, but we lost. Got more votes, but we lost.
What was it like? I mean, I can tell from your voice and the way you're talking about it. It's sort of stacked up to be what you'd maybe
totally
hoped or if not surpassed that. But
yes,
if you think about the reasons why you wanted to get into politics and what you wanted to achieve, was that what you thought? I mean, I'm sort of conscious of the fact that some people get into politics. The reason why I considered it was because you want to see some change. And is it easy to make that change when you're in politics, or do you get caught up in the machine? And
great question. So depends what change you seek. If you are wanting to be and I think all elected MPs, regardless of persuasion, would have this view, I think, is being an electorate MP where you have the obligation of being an advocate for your community. means that you do have the opportunity to make small changes in people's lives which are profound for them. I'll just give you an example. It might be someone has, not been appropriately supported through the health system. It might be an immigration case. It always relates to services provided by the government agencies which are not due the individual. It hasn't worked for them. And your office's ability to get in and through your own personality, relationships, advocacy, understanding of the detail, making a change for them, you do change people's lives. And some of there has been some incredibly emotional moments where you have changed people's lives for the better, right? And have them in tears on the other end of the phone. It's very, it's a privilege to be able to do that. So you are absolutely making a difference at an individual family level, right? And that's a big part of being a community leader. And then you go to the Wellington side, where the change that you can facilitate, by and large, only happens if you're in government, right? I have been lucky. I have had 2 members' bills, one a technical change to the Cooperative Companies Act, and the other a bit more substantive, the change of labelling obligations on sunscreen, that got selected from the ballot, so that's completely random, and then got the opposition, which is the Labor government, to support, which is almost unheard of. So I've had 2 successes there. Put that in context, Trevor Mallard was a politician for 32 years, never had one bill pulled out of the ballot. So I've had 2 in opposition, and both of them got government support. So that was pretty cool. Personally, part of the reason that I'm stepping aside is that I've just run out of enthusiasm for the nature of politics and the political engagement. Probably the high point, second only to being elected the leader of the National Party, was what I did with James Shaw on the Zero Carbon Bill. We negotiated for months to come up with a framework to deal with climate change that would be bipartisan, and we got it across the line. It was a close-run thing, but we got it across the line. And I feel very proud about that, the small part I played in having a piece of legislation that should be enduring, that enables exactly what happened yesterday, an independent climate commission, give advice not only to the government but to the opposition and to the country, saying, we said we needed to be here, we're here, here's the gap, here's how we better fix it. By the way, these policies that the government's doing need to change. That's exactly what you want. And I feel proud about that. But those examples of bipartisanship are few and far between.
I went to my caucus with an idea about food rescue, and I think you mentioned that before. And when I was at Refuge, I worked really closely with Good Neighbour Food Rescue, my local food rescue organisation, who transformed the funding that we needed to get. I didn't have to fundraise for meat and food for families. We had this food supplied to us from Food Rescue, and I basically went to Parliament with the idea that, because I think they basically supported us to the tune of about $70,000 a year worth of food and cleaning products and toilet paper and sanitary products and all of that sort of stuff. So I went to Parliament with the idea that we should do something about that, and I remember the first time I wanted to engage with it, and I took a paper to caucus and I engaged caucus on it, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, sounds like an all right idea," or whatever. But it took a period of time, and the idea itself was picked up in budget. We got $32 million for it, and it was to set up the system across the country at a time when COVID had just hit, where we needed to get food out to families, where we needed a support, we needed a mechanism. And so it was kind of like that fresh thinking, that just at the time it was needed, and that became part of a significant piece of work that continues today now with that food sector, because it's the story, right? It's a story of environmental benefits, but it's also poverty and food poverty. And it's also just about the fact that nobody likes waste. Food waste, how ridiculous. Hungry people, and we're throwing away all this food. So that was an example of how, as a member, I can, you can influence regardless of where you sit in caucus, whether you're a minister or a backbencher.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That some people are so wound up with their point of view that they don't care about their safety or other people's safety. And the worst time I had was a conference in Rotorua. And I've done something with early childhood. And so there were protesters there about early childhood. And regardless of what went on in the conference, when I came out, there was a whole group of people from the early childhood sector. And I stopped and talked to them and talked about what, because you're always trying to explain. There's always reasons why you do. You don't just do things because you want to get at them or off the top of your head you thought it was a good idea. There's normally, a thoughtful process that you've been through and trying to explain to them what my thinking was, why I was doing whatever I was doing. I can't even remember what it was now. And then after about 10 minutes, I wasn't getting anywhere, and they're starting to wind themselves up. And so I had the Secretary for Education, Karen Sewell, was with me, and my press secretary, and can't remember, there's someone else, might have been an advisor, and they said, the car's waiting. I think you should get away now. So we did, and we took my leave of the people and got in the car, and then some of them went and put themselves in front of the car with their children. They had small children with them. And that was really scary, that they would risk, put their own children at risk to make a political point. There was a bit of that, which, it was tough.
How does that kind of, that when you say it's tough, how does that really feel? So I think there's something in this.
Scary.
I mean, obviously, it's when you're a politician, minister, you're very much in the public eye. And we can see what's on the surface, right? But you've already told us that you're a person who keeps your emotions, behind a bit of a screen, for want of a better phrase. But how is it real? I mean, at the end of the day, you're just a person trying to do your best.
Yeah, that's
Never
right.
mind what side of the political fence you're on. You're trying to do what you think is best. And like you said, it's not just a off the cuff kind of idea. There's some thought and there's some effort and energy that's gone into it in the back of that. How does it feel though when you're coming up against that kind of thing, when you're implementing the standards and you're getting pushed back from principles and all that kind of stuff? How do you take that personally?
You either cope with it or you don't, and a lot of people don't. I think because I am that sort of person, I could keep that inside, and I could still have present a reasonable face, try and get a bit of humour sometimes. Like that conference, they'd organised different placards, different coloured placards. So when I mentioned particular words, they would hold up those placards, which was a bit silly, really. My way of coping with it was, when I knew I was going to say national standards, I'd say to them, I'm going to say it, so get ready to hold the blue ones up, Another time I went and they were standing at the back. I think it was PPTA, and they were all standing at the back with these big placards, but I didn't have my glasses on and I'm short-sighted, so I couldn't read them. And I said afterwards, look, I'm sorry, but I couldn't see what was on your placards because I didn't have my glasses on. So you develop ways of coping, but that one with the people in front of the car was the first time I really saw fanaticism almost. and I had a really good relationship with my chief executive, with Karen Sewell, and she could see through my facade that I was really shaken by that. She took me off to a coffee bar. Actually, I went past it not long ago, and I felt myself shaking because I got there and I just burst into tears with her in the bathroom. And then, she took me out and we had a cup of coffee and we sat round and sort of had a bit of a debrief. But generally, I've been fortunate that I've had chief executives who've helped me with a lot of that. You've developed good relationships, trusting relationships, and so they can see through the facade a bit. But it does shake you, and as I say, many people give up. They can't cope with it.
The stress.
It is stressful. And I've had a really good family who've always been very supportive, both children and particularly my husband. And then the party itself actually gave me a huge amount of support. And one or two party members would ring me just out of the blue and just, say, look, I know what your job's, it's tough. And so extraneous support. And then every now and then I'd get someone from the education sector who would also reinforce that we actually believe, you're on the right track.
Right. Yeah.
You're doing the right thing. So all of that sort of bolsters you it's when you feel you're absolutely alone, I think that's the most vulnerable time. And
have you felt that, Anne? Have you been in those situations?
No, I haven't. I've always I haven't, which is probably why I've been able to cope so well.
But there is something to your observation that I think is true and is troubling me, is that over the last 9 years, it feels to me that the nature of the criticism of governments and individuals in governments have become more personal and more toxic, not necessarily in Parliament, because we have very strict rules around what we're allowed to say and not allowed to say. You can't stand up in Parliament and say, you're a liar. You can't even say you, because you're referencing the speaker. So you've got to say, so we've got all these strict standing orders, they're called, rules essentially around how our discourse occurs in Parliament. But that said, there's still, it is always going to be a place of fierce debate. And I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with the chamber being a place of fierce debate. What concerns me is the broader avenues for political discourse beyond Parliament, which historically was just the media, in terms of a journalist's interpretation of what you said and what I said, and some hopefully balanced assessment of that debate. The media, in the traditional sense, is increasingly bypassed by social media, where the same protagonists, the politicians, and those who critique and the public critique the politicians and the journalists, are on the platform of Twitter, bashing the hell out of each other. And the language that's used on that is completely over the top and poisonous and toxic, none of which is allowed in the debating chamber. But you can say whatever you want on social media largely, and people do. And so politicians, not all of them, I hardly ever go on Twitter, but some of my colleagues and the Labour Party are constantly out there promoting their view, and I think fiercely and personally and in a toxic way attacking the opposition. Not only politicians, but also commentators, individuals who have a particular view on life. They're all in there, right? And the journalists are watching and creating and facilitating that, fueling it. And then you've got the more less so the Instagram and stuff, but Facebook is another platform where people I mean, when I put stuff on Facebook, I have someone in my office that sits and moderates and takes out the stuff. Not that's critical to me per se, but the language they use is appalling. It is absolutely vicious language. They will call into, they will attack me for my lack of competency. They will attack me for mental health. Seriously. And so my office tries to hide those. So at least it's not a complete, And so to your question around, what's the leadership then that politicians should show, and what's the behaviour that politicians should try and model in that context, is a very good one because, in my view, I'd put a line through Twitter. I think it brings the worst of us and doesn't necessarily show politicians in a good light because you end up just having fierce partisan conversations all the time in that. And the more fiercer those engagements are, the more edge it then brings to your engagement in the chamber and in your engagement in terms of the broader select committee process, which is supposed to be collaborative. How select committees work is that you've got the majority, I don't, you put this legislation on, we don't like the legislation, we're going to vote against it, but we are now going to spend the next 6 months listening to people's feedback on the legislation, and where we can, we'll try and find agreement on areas that could change, which still means you get your intent, but actually the legislation is better law.
Isn't it? So if you think about the behaviour on Twitter, for instance, what's that demonstrating to the rest of the population about how we engage?
Yeah.
I'm reminded we had Angie Warren-Clark here a few weeks ago. Great conversation. But she talked about the vulnerability that she feels that she's got in public because of the way that people are behaving towards her. And I think that's a change that we've seen.
Yes, it is.
In New Zealand over the last few years.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's been apparent for a long time overseas, but not here. So something has changed, hasn't it, over the last few years, the way that people feel towards politicians, and whether that's the general uncertainty of society these days, or whether it's a reflection of politics in this country. I'm not sure which comes first.
Which does come first. I mean, ultimately, politics reflects society, I think. Now, I know that doesn't remove the obligation from us to show leadership in terms of behaviour and tone and what we call out as acceptable and what we don't call out as accept and what we accept. But that is, it is a increasingly fragmented and fraught society. And I know Ange. I think she's a great person, and I have enjoyed the fact that my political opponent here is someone that I know well, and I would consider a friend. Actually, not a close friend, but we knew each other at university. And she's a great person, and she advocates for her values and her community well. And I see no reason why you can't have a relationship like that. People will vote with who they want to vote for, but you should be able to respect somebody with a different political view because it's a valid view. I don't think it's a view that is right for the country. I prefer National to be in power. But her view is valid, and her right to hold the view is valid. And it's appalling that she's been subjected to the online abuse. But, it's not just her. I think the way people reacted to Jacinda was outrageous. I thought many elements of her policy were appalling in terms of policy, but the vitriol and the misogyny, just shocking. Not from everybody, of course, but the problem is if the more this occurs, the more we become desensitized to it, the more we just accept it as just the noise of day-to-day life, the worse it is for the civility of politics. And that worries me.
And does it become more about, my fear, you've got a love of American politics. I suppose when I look at that from afar, I think it's all about personalities. So I know very little about American policy. It tends to be based on who do you like, who you're going to vote for, and it's about personalities. Are we at risk here of kind of policy becoming less of a factor and feature for people to consider, and more about personality types, because we seem to be targeting the personality of people rather than their policy, which is what you just pointed out about with Jacinda Ardern. Policies may have been flawed from your perspective, but that she's doing the best that she can, like you're doing the best that you can.
Yeah.
But we don't attack the policies, we attack the people. And so is that where we're heading? Is it going to become more about personalities than policy?
Well, that is where it's heading, in my view. We are not America, we are not Australia, we're not Canada, we're not the United Kingdom, but our traditions are more tightly aligned to that than they are of any other jurisdiction in the world, and that's where they're going rapidly. And you can see the same elements in New Zealand politics. Now, my prediction is that this election is going to be brutal. Hopefully it breaks more significantly to national than it is at the moment. But I can see, the next 6 months being a pretty brutal arm wrestle between National Labour that appear to be sort of locked in a sort of largely the same vote each space. Their respective partners, Green Act respectively, largely on the same numbers. And, that's bounced around now for 6 months longer, and it's largely been the same. And you think, goodness me, this means we are going to have, there doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground. Either there's going to be an absolute call for change or an absolute let's keep it as the same, and it's going to be pretty brutal out there. And we must not lose the civility, right? If you get to the point where you just really dislike the person who holds the different political view than you, you're in trouble. And I see it everywhere, and I do not see it as just a creature of the right. And I hate that. I hate the sense of hate's too strong. I dislike the fact that, you see it on Twitter, people who of right persuasion, attack viciously the woke tendencies of the left, and the left attack the right as sort of an incarnation of fascism. And we're using labels with all the subjective weight of history in them as carefree, that we just throw it at each other. And I where does that lead?
Well, it's this incredible mix of just amazing privilege and opportunity with unrelenting work and drudgery.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often tell people it's really funny. You'll be in the supermarket and you'll be, in the sanitary product aisle or something, and someone will be holding you the product, and someone will be up talking to you about their local issue. So you don't get, at times, it can be incredibly intrusive into, sometimes you just need some peace and quiet and calm. I'm in it for more than this year, put it that way. I find it quite, at times, quite aggressive and violent. Is like one of the things that has happened over the last probably couple of years is there has been a real change in how I feel about my personal safety. And a lot of MPs talk about this. So I can be driving on our motorway, or I can be driving on Hewlett's Road, and people will wind down their window and yell and scream abuse at me. I could be at the supermarket and people will just come up to me and bail me up and be really aggressive. I've had people drive towards me in their cars, those kinds of things. That takes a toll. And so it's that balance, right? It's like, I know that this will sound very trite, but I don't do this to get a benefit out of it. Like I'm doing, genuinely want to serve my community. But at some point, if it gets worse, I will make the choice to walk away. And I'll go do something completely different. But literally it's, people think they have the right to have a go at you, and that is not the case. I'll call out abuse where I see it. People don't get a chance to speak to me like that. They want to have a decent and reasonable conversation. Sweet, let's do that. And I can understand that people might be passionate, but abusive, screaming out the window that I'm an driving towards me in their vehicles, those kinds of things.
But clearly you're experiencing a bit of an escalation in that kind of thing. So we need to take notice of that.
And one of the things is I'm quite protected from it. Like when I'm by myself, it's different. But, we have a lot of systems to keep us safe. But, our staff work in an environment that's incredibly abusive to them. And, I make no mistake. I'm not okay with that happening. I was in a workplace where someone was murdered in their workplace at ACC at the time.
Right.
And so I know how things can turn very bad very quickly. But I guess the other part of it is my family as well. So my family never signed up for this. They never signed up to be sitting with me somewhere and have someone bail me up and abuse me. They never signed up for the constant sense of having to kind of monitor my safety and watch. And I'm a relatively low-key MP. Like, a lot of people don't know I'm an MP, and I'm quite happy about that. But, it really upsets my husband. It really does. He's like, I don't want you to do this anymore. Mind you, he did that as well when I was at refuge, and, I'd go out at night and pick up women and stuff. He'd be like, be safe, I'm coming with you, and I'd be like, you can't come with me. They don't want to see you. They want to see women. They don't want to see a man, But yeah, that really, it is hard. It's a huge toll. And then fortunately my kids are older, like they're adults. So that's the other thing, right? If I had smaller kids and that kind of abuse was happening, I'd be very concerned. I wouldn't want to put my children in that circumstance or situation.
So what do you think this is maybe a silly question, but what do you think the answer is, Angie? I mean, because we don't want good people leaving politics through fear.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of, surely it's not the kind of society that we want. We want, again, irrespective of which party we want people representing different views, right? That's
yeah.
Otherwise, we haven't got a democracy anymore.
Absolutely.
And so how do we go about making people like yourself feel safer and actually are safer, not just feel safer, but actually are safer?
Well, like I say, we've got some really good systems in place, and I won't go into them because they are really some really good systems in place to help support our safety personally and on precinct as well as in our offices, etc. But I think, the reality is this: when you're in an environment where it is, people are braver on. They're braver as keyboard warriors than they are any other time. But then there's a percentage of people who are just literally, they don't care. They do not care where you sit. You're a baddie because you're a politician. It doesn't matter what your views are. You're a baddie because you're a politician. Those concerns are that if you were a mum of young kids, you wouldn't, or a dad of young kids, you wouldn't want to do this work. And I guess what it is for New Zealand to grow up a little bit, because we've had it pretty lucky for a long time. I can be in the supermarket on my own shopping, getting me toilet paper. But we just now have to have a different sense of safety because people think it's okay. And again, it comes back to beliefs and values. and mis and disinformation. People believe what they want to believe, and that's
It's a shame,
the
isn't it?
system.
And I've always said, particularly to my team, my family, I don't have to say it to because they do it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, I've never wanted to have people around me who were what you'd call yes people. Always given my staff free license to be upfront and honest. I've always respected that. I can be defensive like anyone. Criticism's always hard to take, but it's I've welcomed having a team that can be honest with me, but also very supportive. And I've had some amazing people work with me and for me over the years. Family are always frank, and that's good. That's fine. Because you need that. They ground you.
Yeah.
But I just think I've been incredibly fortunate, and even now where I am in Tauranga, as in the commission, tremendous staff there supporting the work that the commission's trying to do, and my fellow commissioners. Each one of us brings different skills to the table, and you respect that, and you make the most of it, and you end up with a very strong team.
I just want to pick up on a comment that you said, I think is an important one, which is...
And my team, and I've been really blessed with fantastic people, they assist those constituents with their challenges.
I'd like to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors. I'm really pleased to announce that we have Sharp New Zealand as a sponsor. And it's great to have Sharp on board because as a customer, I can speak about their products and services from personal experience. And it feels good to be able to endorse and recommend a company because of the level of satisfaction we have regarding the services they provide. And across my businesses, we've certainly been impressed with the care and collaboration we've experienced in our dealings with Sharp. It's certainly a brand that we trust. Sharp has a long history of creating breakthrough products designed to meet the needs of people living in New Zealand. Sharp's leadership in technology innovation ensures it's at the forefront of the pack, providing business solutions from printing and photocopying to interactive meeting solutions and ICT phone systems. No matter where you are or what size your organisation, whether you're large or small, Sharp New Zealand can provide their services to you nationwide. If you're looking to upgrade your technology or renew your photocopier leases, talk to your local Sharp team or visit the website at sharp.net.nz.